"I warned you. I'm special ops trained," she said it once. One time, flat and clean, the way a person delivers a fact about the weather or the time of day. Not a boast, not a performance, not a petition for reconsideration. Her hands were open at her sides. Her feet were shoulder-width apart on the gray rubber mat, worn to pale channels where 1,000 trainees had pivoted and stumbled and gotten back up over the years. The training bay smelled of old sweat baked deep into foam and gun oil carried in on gear from the equipment cage. Gunnery Sergeant Dale Pratt laughed. He had a good laugh. Not manufactured. The real article, easy and full and assured. The laugh of a man who has been the loudest voice in every room worth entering for 21 years and has learned to inhabit that position so completely it no longer feels like a position. The 22 Marines in 2 rows behind him laughed with him. Pratt said, "Special ops trained." He turned to the formation with the phrase held out like an exhibit in a trial whose outcome was already established. "She's special ops trained, gentlemen. Somebody better watch themselves." More laughter. Louder this time. A corporal in the back row was still going when the others had settled. She had been at the Combat Readiness Center for 11 weeks and 2 days. She had entered through the contractor processing office on a Monday morning in February with a Performance Services Corporation badge, a letter of engagement for athletic training services, and a polo shirt with no rank or identifier of any kind. She had spent 11 weeks and 2 days being exactly what the badge said she was: methodical, present, quiet, taking notes in a notebook that anyone was welcome to look at, and nobody had ever asked to read. This was the first time in 11 weeks and 2 days that anyone had invited her onto the mat. She had not invited herself. She didn't move, didn't look at the door, didn't look at her notebook, which was in her cargo pocket where it always was. A green government-issue field notebook, its cover worn soft from 11 weeks of daily handling, its pages written in a compressed shorthand that looked like abbreviated longhand to anyone who didn't know what it actually was. She looked at Pratt. Storm water eyes. Still and flat. The color of a sky that has already made its decision. Nothing moved in her face. 5 Marines stepped onto the mat. Corporals Drex, Halstead, Mack, Torres, and PFC Wen. The lightest of them was 194 pounds. The heaviest, 231. All combat trained, all carrying the relaxed, unhurried confidence of men who have run exactly this category of drill before and know precisely how it ends. She breathed. 4 counts in, slow, controlled, chest barely visible in its rise. 4, hold, 4, out, 4, hold. Then the 5 came. Drex went for the arms from the left. Halstead dropped low for the legs in the standard leg dive that had worked consistently for 2 years of combatives training. Mack and Torres drove for the torso in a double shoulder slam that had put men of 240 pounds flat in under 2 seconds. PFC Wen closed the gap from the rear to eliminate the possibility of retreat. She didn't fight, didn't swing, didn't kick, made no sound. She moved within the attacks, weight shifting 3 precise inches at the exact moment Drex's hands arrived. His grip found a surface that was no longer where it had been, and his own momentum carried him a full step past her, one arm raking air. Halstead's leg dive was met by a hip rotation that redirected his force downward and to the outside. He went to the mat on his own terms, which turned out to be the wrong terms entirely. Torres and Mack hit a partial vacancy. She had moved into the attack's center rather than backing away from it, her left shoulder rotating under Mack's driving arm in a mechanic sequence that left Torres off balance and Mack turning into his own forward motion. She went down with Torres's momentum, not taken down, choosing, and was back on her feet before he had reached his knees. One motion, heel to toe, weight forward, hands still open at her sides. Wen arrived from the rear and found her standing. 47 seconds. 5 Marines on the mat. 1 contractor standing. Pratt's smile was in exactly the same position on his face as it had been when he issued the instruction. Everything behind the smile had moved several degrees in a direction he would not acknowledge until circumstances made acknowledgement unavoidable. In the equipment cage at the training bay's far wall, Master Gunnery Sergeant Roland Hawes, 58 years old, 32 years of service, had set his clipboard on the top supply shelf at approximately the 8-second mark of the drill. He was holding his pen in his left hand. He had not written anything with it for 39 seconds before the drill ended. He had not moved to write anything since. His eyes had not left the mat. He had seen this technique once before. A specialized course at Fort Bragg, 2014. An instructor he had never known by full name, who ran a close combat recovery module for 12 students whose unit designators were not on any standard organizational chart Hawes had ever been issued. The angle of the hip rotation. The specific choice to absorb into the center of an attack rather than deflect away from its edges. The mechanics of the controlled rise. Heel before toe, weight forward, no scramble, no moment where balance was ever in genuine question. He had written one line about it in his personal journal the night of that course. Looks like water. Moves like the person knows exactly where the floor is going to be before it gets there. He had not thought about that line again until 47 seconds ago. Pratt addressed the formation. His voice was even and authoritative, and carried the scene forward at the speed he required. Pratt said, "Drex, you telegraphed your approach from 6 feet. That's a technique failure. Halstead, you dove before she committed weight. That's a second individual technique failure. What this is not is a demonstration of anything except what happens when my people make avoidable mistakes in a controlled environment." He turned to Tara with the measured patience of a man explaining a simple concept to someone who asked an ambitious question. I have watched yoga instructors make 5 clumsy men trip over each other in a sequence. That is not special operations. That is someone who has spent a great deal of time watching instructional content and then ended up in a room with 5 people who made mistakes at the wrong moments. He walked. The formation moved with him. Laughter resumed behind them at reduced volume. The category of laughter that reasserts something that has been briefly, quietly unsettled and requires reassertion to stay in place. Tara stepped off the mat. She pulled the green notebook from her cargo pocket and wrote 2 lines. Her hand was steady. The pen moved in the cipher she had been using since year 2 of active service. A rotating compression shorthand, so habitual to her fingers that she produced it without conscious direction, the way a person drives a familiar route. Names, times, the specific phrasing of what was said, what was heard from the formation, the 47-second count, 5 names. 1 data point about the man in the equipment cage who had set his clipboard down and not picked it up again. Pratt said, "Somebody please tell Performance Services their contractor needs to remove herself from the training floor and leave it to the people who were trained for it." Laughter. Boots on concrete. The training bay emptied. Tara closed the notebook. She looked at the worn channels in the mat where 47 seconds had just happened. She looked at the fluorescent lights above the I-beams. She breathed. 4 counts in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. Hawes was still in the equipment cage. His clipboard was still on the supply shelf. He watched her turn toward the contractor office corridor. He watched her walk the way she always walked. Measured, economical, weight-centered, nothing performed, nothing wasted, nothing in the stride that was not strictly necessary for forward motion. He watched until she was through the bay door and around the corridor corner and out of his line of sight. He stood at the equipment cage for another 30 seconds without moving. He picked up the clipboard. He looked at what was on it. He set it back down. He was going to have to think carefully about this. The training bay had seen 1,000 demonstrations across 20 years of Marine Corps training operations. Gunnery Sergeant Pratt had run 100 of them himself. He knew what a legitimate combatives demonstration looked like, and he knew what a lucky sequence of opponent errors looked like, and he had told the formation with full conviction that what they had just watched was the second category. He had said it and believed it and walked away. But belief, as any man with 32 years of service could confirm, is a different substance than certainty, and the two do not always arrive together. Pratt would not admit the distinction, not today, not to himself or anyone in the formation. But Hawes had watched the moment Pratt's jaw tightened, a single half-second of tightening, his own tells as diagnostic as anyone else's, and filed it alongside everything else he was now carrying. 2 days later, the obstacle course, 0915. A Marine PFC on his first week at the center misjudged the 12-foot wall drop and landed with his left arm at the wrong angle. The snap carried from 8 feet and landed in the silence between training cadence counts. He went down hard. 12 Marines on the course stopped around him, the way moving water stops at an obstruction, forming a temporary ring of concern, with no one inside it who knew the correct first action. Tara was the closest person with relevant training of any kind. She covered the distance in 3 strides. She was already kneeling before the base corpsman had his kit bag's zipper fully open across the course. She did not go to the wall-mounted first aid station. She reached into her left cargo pocket. She extracted a SAM splint, a compression wrap, and a tourniquet in the time it would take a corpsman to locate the correct internal pocket of a standard-issue bag. Then she called the injury in a format that no athletic trainer learns in any sports medicine certification program. Tara said, "Left radius, compound suspect. PFC, responsive, airway clear, no visible blood loss. Corpsman inbound. 2 personnel at the wall, 10 o'clock, grid reference Alpha 7. I've got him." Hawes was at the far end of the course near the gear shed, running a supply inventory. He heard 10 o'clock. He heard grid reference Alpha 7. He heard the specific practiced efficiency of the call-out, the cadence of a person who has called in injuries in conditions where being wrong by one descriptor costs something that cannot be recovered after the fact. She stabilized the fracture in 91 seconds. The SAM splint application had the precision and speed of a person who has done this particular action in the field, under conditions that were less controlled than a training course on a clear Tuesday morning. The lot number on the packaging was visible when she tore the seal. April 2019. 7 years old. She had been carrying this specific splint in this specific cargo pocket for 7 years. The corpsman arrived, assessed her work, and changed nothing. He looked at her with the specific expression of a person updating a model he had believed, until 91 seconds ago, was complete. Hawes crossed the course after the corpsman walked the PFC to the medical tent. He didn't speak to Tara. He watched her pack the cargo pocket. The SAM splint wrapper went in with the rest of the kit, not into the site waste disposal. She carried it away. He noted the lot dates. He noted the 10 o'clock call-out. He noted that she had confirmed the corpsman's position without turning to look. He noted the SAM splint packing configuration, not the athletic trainer standard, but the configuration combat medics used for rapid single-hand access in low-visibility environments, where slowing down was not a viable option. He'd heard that grid reference habit before. Mountain warfare course some years back. Instructors who came from places that did not appear in the news. Pratt appeared at the course perimeter. He took in the scene in 10 seconds. Corpsman's retreating back. Tara reclosing her cargo pocket. 12 Marines standing around a position that no longer had anyone in it. Pratt said, "Why is the contractor administering first aid on my training course?" The corpsman said, "She had the right kit and made the right call. I changed nothing." Pratt looked at Tara. Pratt said, "You carry a Sam splint in your pants pocket." Tara said, "Yes, sir." Pratt said, "Athletic trainers don't carry combat field dressings in their personal pockets." Tara said, "No, sir." He waited. 4 full seconds. He was waiting for the nervous qualifier, the defensive explanation, the elaboration that would give him traction. She provided none of it. She stood with her cargo pocket resealed and her notebook closed, looking at a point approximately 8 inches past his left shoulder, which was where her eyes went when a conversation had concluded. Pratt said, "Get off my course." She left. Hawes watched Pratt walk toward the center's main corridor. He watched Tara move the other direction. He stood at the course perimeter for a moment, with the late morning sun across his left side, and thought about the number stored in his personal cell under the name Coles, J. He thought, "Not yet." He thought, "I need at least 2 more instances that I cannot explain as coincidence." He thought, "I need to be certain before I make that call." He was wrong about needing more data. He was right about not making the call yet. He walked back to the equipment cage. The gear shed at the course's perimeter held a wall-mounted first aid station that was checked every Monday and restocked from the medical supply room on the 2nd floor of the center's main building. The station held standard-issue athletic trainer supplies, elastic bandages, ice packs, non-sterile gauze, trauma pads rated for civilian sports injuries. It did not hold Sam splints. It did not hold combat gauze. It did not hold tourniquets of the specific generation and configuration she had deployed from her cargo pocket. Those items were combat medical supplies, the kind a person carried when they anticipated encountering a combat-grade injury, the kind with 7-year-old lot numbers because the person who carried them had been carrying their own kit in this configuration since 2019. Hawes had done a silent inventory of this difference on his walk back from the course. He noted it. He filed it. He set it next to the Breckfall mechanics and let the collection grow. The group chat photograph was posted that evening at 1941. Tara on the mat, mid-sentence, hands open at her sides, 5 Marines converging from all compass points. Lieutenant Carl Foster had taken it from the equipment cage doorway on a personal phone he carried specifically for this operational function. Caption: all capitals, no punctuation. Special OPS trained. 29 laughing reactions in 4 minutes. 7 more in the subsequent 60 seconds. By the following morning, the nickname had moved through the center's corridors with the comfortable velocity of a joke that everyone already knew the setup to. Lieutenant Carl Foster was 27 years old. He had been at the center for 3 years and had learned one durable lesson in that time. Proximity to Pratt was its own category of rank, more operationally useful on a daily basis than the lieutenant's bar on his collar. He managed the center's equipment accountability software, the system through which every item of issued gear was tracked, verified, and documented for federal audit purposes. He also managed the social infrastructure Pratt required to make enclosed spaces feel collectively hostile to specific individuals. The group chat, the nickname assignments, the manufactured consensus that certain categories of people did not belong, and the appropriate response to their presence was coordinated, impersonal, and total. The nickname found her the following morning at breakfast, delivered by a pair of corporals in the DFAC line, one of them saying, "Special Ops," under his breath, in the tone a punchline uses when the setup has already been run in every room. She made no reaction. She took her tray to the condiment counter, where the tables she approached had all reached maximum occupancy at the moment of her arrival, and ate standing with her notebook open on the stainless steel counter beside her. 3 days later, a second photograph. Tara at the condiment counter, tray in her right hand, notebook open on the counter, alone. Caption: even eats alone. 42 reactions before midnight. She was already asleep. Her phone was switched off, It did not change a single variable in what the following morning looked like for her. 2 days after the second photograph, equipment corridor. Corporal Reyes, 22 years old, supply accountability role, young enough that the social arithmetic of the group chat still governed more of his behavior than he would have admitted if asked directly, approached her with the particular condescension that performs for an audience that isn't present, asking why she kept writing in the notebook, whether she was keeping a feelings journal. She was at the corridor window. The window faced the training field. She had been looking at the field for approximately 40 seconds before he arrived, and she had been reading it, not watching it vacantly, reading it, the way a person reads text they have been trained to read. Tara said, "Your left flank is open. 200 meters, 8 o'clock from the compound entry. Anyone with tactical awareness can walk through there without encountering a challenge until they're inside the perimeter wire." Reyes stared. She had not looked up from the notebook when she said it. His mouth opened. It closed. He walked away with an expression of a man who has asked a simple question and received an answer that belongs to a different conversation. Hawes was passing the corridor entrance at that precise moment. He stopped. He looked at the field. He located the 8 o'clock position from the compound entry. The left wire had drifted 3 meters forward from its anchor stake, creating a gap in the perimeter that any tactical assessment would flag in the first sweep. She had read it from a standing position at a corridor window, without being prompted, stated the distance and the clock position with zero hesitation, and then returned to her notebook as though the observation were ordinary. The whole thing took 11 seconds. Have you ever been the most competent person in a room that refused to see it? Hit that like button if you believe the silent ones are worth watching, and smash the thanks button to support stories like this so they keep being told. That night, the second photograph circulated. 42 reactions. Pratt satisfied with the social machinery's performance. In the equipment cage after closing, Hawes sat for an hour with an untouched cup of coffee. He had been accumulating data points for 11 days. The breakfall and controlled rise, the combat gauze lot numbers, the 10 o'clock grid callout, the compound entry gap read through a window without being asked, and a fifth thing that had been sitting in the back of his mind since the obstacle course, the way she had said, "I've got him." The flat certainty of it, the voice of a person who has said exactly those words in conditions where the alternative to having the casualty was not survivable. He thought about the phone number under Coles J. He thought, when I call, I need to have something specific enough that he can't dismiss it as coincidence. He ran the 5 data points. They were specific enough. They had been specific enough for 3 days. He didn't call yet. He was running out of reasons not to. The nickname had a specific function beyond humiliation. Foster had run this playbook before, on 2 previous occasions, when Pratt had identified an individual as a threat to the operational status quo. You give them a name that summarizes the dismissal, you distribute the name widely, and you create a social environment in which taking that person seriously requires a deliberate act of social courage that most people in a formation are not prepared to perform. The nickname was a force multiplier. It meant that when Pratt's formal complaint was filed, anyone who might have offered a counter-statement would have to do so while implicitly endorsing the person their colleagues had spent 2 weeks calling special ops in the dismissive register. Hawes had noticed this architecture. He had named it to himself. He had not participated in the group chat when Foster added him to the thread. He had not been asked again. Pratt filed the formal safety and conduct complaint on Friday morning at 0900. 5 pages, organized and specific, and sufficiently alarmed to require institutional response. The contractor had made unsubstantiated Special Forces credential claims in a training environment. She had performed an unauthorized medical intervention. She exhibited behavioral patterns inconsistent with her contracted role. There was a potential case for professional misrepresentation. Pratt had drafted it with the care of a man who understood that documents, once they exist in a system, acquire authority independent of the truth they do or do not contain. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Doyle received it at 0930. She was a by-the-book officer who had spent 22 years building a career on the proposition that the system, properly operated, produced correct outcomes. She had to act on it. Tara was at the training bay at 0900 when two MPs, professional, correct, doing the exact job the complaint had put in front of them, informed her that her contractor badge had been flagged and deactivated, pending full investigation. 30 minutes to collect personal effects and report to the provost office. She collected 3 things: the green notebook, the handler phone, a small photograph held inside the notebook's back cover, a young man in gray Army PT gear at a base perimeter wire in afternoon light, 19 years old, squinting into the sun, smiling with the unguarded ease of a person who does not yet know what is on the way. She looked at the photograph for 3 seconds. She closed the notebook around it. She walked to the provost office. The holding room, concrete walls, metal bench, a toilet without a lid, one window near the ceiling showing 3 inches of east-facing sky above the motor pool's roofline. The time was 0945 when she entered. She had been in worse rooms. In 2020, in a basement in Aleppo with no window at all, she had sat for 6 days before extraction. She had learned there, in a way that could not be unlearned, that the room itself cannot remove what you have already decided is not available for removal. The room is just a room. You are still exactly who you are inside it. She sat on the metal bench. She breathed. 4 counts in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. She watched the light move across the 3-inch strip of window near the ceiling. The light moved with the patience of something that has been performing this motion since before human observation existed to name it. She had learned, at some point during 7 years of operational work, in environments far more hostile than this holding room, to find the pace of stillness and match it rather than spend energy fighting it. You lose nothing by moving at the speed the light moves. Hawes submitted a formal written counterstatement to Doyle's office by noon that day. He had witnessed the subject's actions during the combatives exercise and the obstacle course medical response. Neither constituted misconduct, and the safety complaint appeared retaliatory in its construction and timing. Doyle acknowledged it and explained that the counterstatement could not be acted on until the investigation ran its procedural course. His document was logged, dated, placed in a file, placed in a locked cabinet. He went back to the equipment cage. He sat at his desk. He looked at the clipboard. He did not pick it up. He had filed what was available to file. He had said what could be said inside the rules of the system. None of it had moved the situation 1 measurable inch. The system that was built to protect people from exactly this category of institutional abuse was being used, with precision and deliberate intent, as the instrument of that abuse. He had seen this before, not often, and hated it in the same specific way every time. The room as weapon, the process as the attack. She was in the holding room at 0945, and she was still there at 1800 hours. 9 hours. The light in the 3-inch window had gone dark. She had not requested legal counsel, had not spoken to the MPs who checked the corridor at intervals, had not called anyone. She sat with the notebook on her knee and the photograph of Estevez inside it, and the handler phone in her cargo pocket, and she watched the light change and then disappear in the small window near the ceiling, and she breathed through the 4-count cycle, and she waited with the unhurried patience of a person who knows what is going to happen and understands that it will happen on its own schedule. 4 counts in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. 1 star appeared in the narrow dark window. The generator hummed a constant tone from across the motor pool. She pulled the photograph from inside the notebook. She held it without looking at it. She already knew every detail of it by heart. The angle of the afternoon light, the specific way his left shoulder was slightly higher than his right, the smudge on the lower right corner from a day in the field. She set it face down on the bench. She breathed one cycle. She put it back inside the notebook and closed the cover. Saturday evening, 8 days after the pylon, parking structure, base's eastern lot. Hawes sat with the engine off and the fluorescent parking level lights casting their particular flat yellow across the dashboard. The number under Coles, J, had been in his personal contacts for 2 years, acquired at a joint training conference in Jacksonville. Retired Master Sergeant Jerry Coles, 61, 11 years running specialized training programs at Fort Bragg, currently operating a security consulting practice out of Raleigh. If the mechanics Hawes had observed belonged to a specific pipeline, Coles would know which one. He called. He described, without names and without location reference, what he had observed across 11 days. The fall recovery mechanics from the combatives drill, the combat gauze lot numbers and packing configuration, the clock face grid reference on the obstacle course, the compound entry gap read from a corridor window. He described each one with the methodical precision of a man presenting evidence, because that was what he was doing. Coles was quiet for a significant interval after Hawes finished. Coles said, "The fall recovery pattern you're describing, that is not athletic training, and it is not standard military combatives curriculum. It comes from a close combat recovery module that was taught to specific JSOC personnel inside a training pipeline that ran from 2017 to 2022. Fewer than 200 people on this continent went through that specific version of that specific module. Most of them work for units that don't have publicly available addresses." Hawes said, "That's consistent with what I've been thinking." Coles said, "If she reacts the way you're describing, doesn't fight back, only absorbs, comes back to standing clean every time. That is not the product of commercial fitness training. That is a specific pipeline, learned under specific instruction in a specific location. And if she comes from that pipeline, Roland, I need you to walk away from whatever situation you're describing. Whatever she's doing in that location, she's doing it with authorizations that exist at a level you don't have visibility on." Hawes said, "She's been in a holding room for 8 days. Coles said, "Then I am genuinely sorry for her situation, and I am not in a position to help you with this further. Do not call this number again in connection with this matter." The call ended. Hawes sat in the parking structure and let the silence settle. Fluorescent light overhead flickered once, steadied. He thought about what Coles had confirmed. 200 people. That pipeline. That specific. He placed it against the architecture of Pratt's 11-day response, the photograph, the nickname, the formal complaint, the 9 hours of holding. Each element more organized than simple hazing warranted. Each constructed specifically to remove, rather than discipline. Faster than a man reacting to embarrassment. More deliberate than a man reacting to annoyance. A man with something to protect reacted at a different pace and with a different architecture than a man who simply had rank and disliked being challenged. Pratt's pace had been wrong from the Tuesday morning it began. He was not reacting to a contractor who had embarrassed him in a drill. He was reacting to something he believed or suspected she was, which meant he already knew, or was working on a strong suspicion, that she was specifically dangerous to him in a professional and legal sense. He drove to base housing, kitchen table, cold coffee. He thought about 32 years, about the small things available inside a system with rules, and what those things were worth, and what they were not worth. He had done all of them. Something's been hiding under that polo for 11 weeks, and you already know it isn't a PT certification. What's your theory? Drop it in the comments. And if you're hooked, subscribe. The reveal is coming, and nothing about it is going to be quiet. The following Monday, badge reinstated pending investigation outcome. She passed him in the equipment corridor at standard pace with her notebook in her left hand. She stopped at the far end without being directed to stop and looked through the window at the obstacle course. Tara said, "Outer wire's been moved again. Left flank, southeast corner, 3 meters forward of its position last week." She said it to no one in the corridor. She kept walking. Hawes looked at the wire. She was right. He looked after her until she rounded the corridor. He thought, "Every day you are here, you are building a complete picture of this installation that has no legitimate purpose in an athletic trainer's professional practice. You are building it automatically, without being asked to, as a function of how your mind has been trained to process the environment around it." He thought, Pratt is not reacting to a contractor who embarrassed him. He is reacting to a threat he recognized on day one, and every action he has taken since has been the action of a man who is afraid of being found. The group chat, the formal complaint, the 9 hours of holding that were designed not to contain her, but to provoke a reaction, a lawyer request, a phone call, an angry statement to the MPs that would give Pratt's paper record the emotional instability it needed to support removal. She had not provided any of those things. She had sat for 9 hours on a metal bench and watched light move through a 3-inch window. This, Hawes now understood, was also trained behavior. The refusal to react was not passivity. It was operational discipline, the patient maintenance of cover under conditions designed to break it. She had recognized the trap and declined to enter it, which told him something about the length and specificity of her preparation. 2,200 hours, Tara's temporary billet, 12 by 9, metal frame bed, footlocker. The motor pool's sodium lights throwing an orange rectangle across the linoleum through the window. The generator hum constant and low. Overhead light off. She used the lamp on the nightstand. She sat on the bed's edge. She reached under the mattress, a habit from 7 years of assignments, where under the mattress was the most defensible location for what you did not want found, and removed the handler phone. Matte black. No manufacturer identification, pre-programmed to one purpose. The single contact read, "Handler" in capitals, with no additional designation. She held the phone on her knee for a moment. Her name was Captain Tara Marie Voss, age 31. Born June 9, 1994, in Boise, Idaho, United States Army. Joint Special Operations Command. 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Call sign, Nighthawk 1. Confirmed field operations. Classified. 7 years active as a Delta operator. 3 cover identities maintained under the JSOC Embedded Audit Program, including the current one. Current cover duration, 11 weeks, 2 days, and 14 hours as of this moment. She reached to the back cover of the green notebook. Photograph, held flat against the interior cardboard. A young man in gray Army PT gear standing at a perimeter wire in afternoon light, squinting against it, smiling with the unguarded openness of 19 years. Written on the back in her own handwriting, Marco, November 2022. She held the photograph by its edges without bending it. Private First Class Marco Esteves had been 20 years old. He had asked good questions, and he had worked at twice the required pace, and he had been the kind of junior soldier who made the informal mentorship feel bilateral, like something that mattered to both parties in equal and different ways. She had made time for it in margins that were not supposed to have margins in them. He had done the same. He had deployed to a joint training exercise in eastern Poland in the autumn of 2022. The body armor issued to him had been inspected at 4 checkpoints, stamped, documented. The liner had not been standard, a counterfeit component, manufactured in a facility with no connection to any legitimate military supply chain, had replaced the genuine article when the genuine article was diverted through a network of supply chain manipulation routed through several Marine Corps training installations. The counterfeit liner had passed visual inspection at every checkpoint and failed on first lateral fragmentation impact from a training round. The post-incident investigation ran 14 months and produced 312 pages of documentation. The final 11 pages traced the specific diversion lot to a combat readiness center on the east coast of the United States. She had volunteered for the embedded assignment before she finished reading the final page. She was not here because of the group chat, or the nickname, or the 9 hours on the metal bench, or the way certain corridors felt when she moved through them. She was here because somewhere in the 47 months of paper trail she had been methodically documenting since February, there was a connection between Gunnery Sergeant Dale Pratt and the specific diversion lot that had included the liner in Marco Estevez's issued armor. She had not found it yet. She was close enough to feel its specific shape in the documents she had already acquired. She opened the handler phone. She typed one line. Pratt crossed the line. Proceed. She pressed send. The message vanished. No delivery confirmation, no read receipt, no trace visible to the device's user. Somewhere on a secure channel, a duty officer received a one-line notification and reached for a different phone. She set the handler phone on the nightstand. The photograph of Estevez went face down beside it. She lay back on the bed and looked at the ceiling where the lamp's light did not quite reach. She breathed. 4 counts in. 4 hold. 4 out. 4 hold. Tomorrow the trap closed. She had been patient for 11 weeks, and for 22 years before that. Patience was not waiting. Patience was not endurance. Patience was precision applied to the specific moment when the evidence package completed itself, and the people who had built their comfort on her apparent passivity discovered, too late, that the passivity had been deliberate from day one. She reached up and clicked off the lamp. The room went to orange shadow from the motor pool lights. Generator hum. She closed her eyes. She did not look at the photograph again. She already knew it completely. Evidence storage corridor, 2317. The overhead camera's maintenance window had been entered into the IT schedule by Foster as a routine diagnostic cycle. 90 seconds of camera downtime, scheduled to open at 23:15 and close at 23:46. 29 minutes of unrecorded corridor. The holding facilities corridor had been built in 1983 and had not been substantially renovated since. It had the particular institutional smell of concrete and disinfectant that all facilities of this age and function develop, and it was illuminated at night by a single fluorescent tube at each end of the corridor. Enough to navigate, not enough to work by. Tara had been in this corridor, at the gap, for 41 minutes before Pratt arrived. She had calibrated the camera's low-light performance against the corridor's available light level 3 days earlier, during a routine access of the evidence room to sign a processing form. The hairpin camera would produce usable footage. She had confirmed this. She had then returned to her billet and reported to her handler that the setup was complete. Pratt entered with a secondary access card, moving with the assurance of a man who has checked every variable he can see and found them all satisfactory. Foster followed with a flash drive and a brown document folder. Behind Foster, Kenny Bork, 44, operator of a civilian surplus business from a storage facility outside Charlotte, off-base coordinator and distribution endpoint for the network for 4 years. Pratt had called Bork in for a specific purpose. If the investigation escalated to federal proceedings, he needed a witness whose cooperation was structurally guaranteed by shared legal exposure. Pratt said, 3 minutes. Foster, drive goes in the outer pocket of the bag. Bork, you are here because if this moves to federal, I need your name on my side of the record. Visible. Not absent. Understood? Bork said, understood. Tara was in the adjacent corridor. 2 inches of door gap, the maintenance gap she had measured that morning and confirmed had not been corrected. her left eye at the gap, her right hand holding a JSOC-issued camera no larger than a box of matches. Breathing. Metered. 4-count. Silent. The hairpin on the outer pocket of her contractor bag had been transmitting a live feed to her handler's secure monitoring channel since 2100 hours. Her handler had been actively watching for 2 hours and 16 minutes. Foster opened the bag. He inserted a flash drive, a fabricated evidence package containing altered training records, and 2 documents with Tara's contractor identifier applied to them by Foster, backdated to her first week at the center. Bork signed a single sheet Pratt set before him, a fabricated witness statement asserting threatening statements before the combatives' demonstration, signed and dated in Bork's own hand. 2 minutes and 53 seconds. Every frame on the hairpin feed, transmitted live. Every frame on Tara's camera, transmitted live. Pratt exited the corridor. He checked the camera housing above the door. Maintenance window intact. He nodded at Foster. The confidence in his posture was the confidence of a man who has controlled every variable visible to him and operates on the assumption that invisible variables do not exist. He turned toward the facility exit. In the adjacent corridor, Tara watched him go through 2 inches of gap. She sent the footage to her handler. She removed her eye from the gap. She stood in the dark corridor, with her back flat against the concrete wall, camera in hand, the wall cool through the polo fabric. Then she did something she had not done once in 11 weeks. Not on the mat. Not in the holding room. Not in 9 hours on the metal bench. She smiled. Small. Cold. Precisely calibrated. The kind of smile that carries no warmth, but holds the exact weight of 2 minutes and 53 seconds of footage that cannot be unmade and cannot be denied by anyone who views it. The kind of smile that belongs to no one else in the room because there is no one else in the room. The kind that means exactly what was supposed to happen has happened, on schedule, in front of a camera. He had no idea what the smile meant. She knew exactly what it meant. By morning, so would everyone else. She stood in the dark corridor for 90 seconds after Pratt's footsteps were gone. Not from caution. The corridor was clear. The camera's maintenance window had another 18 minutes before it closed, and her exit route was memorized to the point of automaticity. She stood because the smile needed somewhere to go. That was not the file she was about to transmit. Not the handler channel. Not the debrief she would write in the green notebook before sleeping. It had been 11 weeks. It had been 4 years since the diversion lot report first appeared in classified channels with no actionable follow-up. It had been 3.5 years since the post-incident investigation produced 312 pages and a trail that pointed here. She allowed herself 90 seconds of stillness in a dark corridor. Then she moved. 0900. The battalion briefing room. Long table. Classified marker bars across the bottom of the briefing screen. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Doyle at the head, with a legal pad and a pen. Pratt to her left with his legal counsel beside him. Foster 2 seats down, hands folded flat on the table. Tara on the opposite side. No counsel, no staff, no support. Her contractor polo, her cargo pants. The green notebook closed on the table with both hands flat on either side of it. Pratt's opening statement was organized, measured, and thoroughly rehearsed. He began with the credential misrepresentation. He moved to the unauthorized medical intervention and the behavioral pattern analysis. He was 3 minutes into a well-built argument that was approaching the fabricated evidence package when Doyle set down her pen. Doyle said, "Before we go further, I want to establish who I am actually looking at. Not the performance services documentation, her own record. Who is this individual?" Tara said, "Yes, ma'am." She reached into her cargo pocket. She placed a laminated card face up on the table. No photograph. No name in any standard government typeface. a 12-digit alphanumeric code in Department of Defense font, a watermark that resolved into the JSOC insignia under direct light at a specific angle, a phone number in the lower right corner, no label. Doyle slid the card to the classification terminal at her right elbow. The terminal accepted it. The screen returned in a combination of red and gold that neither Doyle nor anyone else at the table had seen on a base-level terminal. Personnel file restricted. JSOCSAP authorization required. Contact number listed. Pratt said, "That card could be..." His legal counsel was on his feet. "I want physical service identification right now. I want to see her service markings." An MP at the room's sidewall crossed to Tara. He moved faster than the situation's procedural requirements. His hand closed on her left forearm above the wrist to position her for the biometric scanner. He turned her arm. The polo's shoulder seam, worn thin from 11 weeks of daily use and the prior strain from the pile-on drill, tore when his grip twisted it. The room went dead silent. On her inner left forearm, in clean black ink from 7 years ago, a hawk in full flight, wings extended wing to wing, talons forward and fully open. Beneath the hawk, in the same artist's hand, a unit designator, TF-D/NH1. Beneath that, a date range, April 2019 to present. Hawes was standing at the room's rear corner. He had requested to witness the hearing, and Doyle had permitted it as a matter of administrative record. He had been there for 41 minutes. He had known since Tuesday morning, 11 weeks ago. He had filed the counterstatement, made the call to Coles, watched every day, done each small thing the system permitted him. He looked at the tattoo. He looked at the designator, he said in a voice that did not rise and did not tremble and had not one note of surprise. Hawes said, "That is a Delta Force operator marking. The Hawk configuration and the NH1 designator are specific to the JSOC Nighthawk cell. That is not a commercial tattoo." Doyle called the number on the card's back. 2 rings. The voice that answered was female, terse, carrying the particular authority of someone who manages programs that do not appear in open-source reporting under any search parameter. Doyle identified herself and her installation. The voice said, "Lieutenant Colonel Doyle, personnel will arrive at your location in approximately 20 minutes. Captain Voss has been on authorized embedded audit assignment at your installation since February 2nd of this year under JSOCSAP authorization code 77 Golf. Every administrative action taken against her at your installation during that period constitutes interference with an active federal audit. I would recommend you step back from whoever is standing immediately to your left." Doyle set the phone face up on the table. She stepped back 1 full step. Pratt looked at the phone. He looked at the torn sleeve. He looked at the tattoo. He looked at Tara, whose hands were still flat on either side of the notebook, whose posture had not changed, whose expression had not moved at any point in the past 9 minutes. 22 minutes after the card was scanned, the rotor wash announced what was outside. 2 Blackhawks. The briefing room's window faced the parade ground. Everyone at the table could see them. The first touched down at 7 minutes past 10, the second 30 seconds behind. Out of the lead helicopter, Brigadier General Sandra Yates, 53, JSOC Special Programs Director in dress uniform. 2 aides in service dress. She crossed the parade ground without hurrying and without hesitation, 30 measured steps, and entered the building. She entered the briefing room. The room had 12 people in it. Doyle, Pratt, Pratt's counsel, Foster, 2 MPs, 2 of Yates's aides, the briefing room's admin clerk, and Hawes at the rear. 12 people who had arrived at this room with varying degrees of understanding of what it contained. The clarity that entered with Brigadier General Yates's salute arrived at different speeds for different people in that room. but it arrived for all of them within the same 4 seconds. And what it produced, in the clerk, in the MPs, in Doyle, in Foster, and most completely in Pratt, was the specific, disorienting sensation of having been wrong about the most fundamental fact of a situation for 11 weeks straight. Hawes did not experience this. He had known. He had done the small things available, and he had waited for this moment. And it arrived exactly as the evidence suggested it would. She looked at Tara. Tara stood. Brigadier General Sandra Yates rendered a full formal salute. The room went silent in the way rooms go silent when the entire architecture of rank and apparent authority inside them has been rewritten in a single gesture in approximately 4 seconds. Pratt's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, recognition, and horror. Confusion when the general entered and looked at the contractor across the table. Disbelief when the general saluted first. Recognition when the general said, in a voice that reached every corner of the room without apparent effort, "Captain Voss." Horror when the MP who had torn the polo sleeve set down his biometric scanner and removed from his belt a pair of handcuffs. Pratt said, "She set this up. This entire situation was a setup from the first day. She came here specifically to trap us." Yates said, "Keep talking, Gunnery Sergeant. You are considerably simplifying the work of the investigators assigned to your case." The handcuffs clicked. Pratt was walked to the door, still talking. Nobody in the room was listening. Foster had not moved from his seat. He was looking at his hands on the table with the expression of a man watching a decision he made 3 years ago arrive at its final destination. Bork, located by MPs at the facility lobby at 0947, was already in a separate holding room. Tara picked up the green notebook. She opened it. She wrote 1 line. She closed the cover. She set it on the table and breathed. 4 counts in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. And for the first time in 11 weeks, the breath at the end of the cycle was not preparation for what came next. It was just breath. By Wednesday, Gunnery Sergeant Dale Pratt was arraigned on 4 federal charges: equipment theft, federal procurement fraud, falsification of government records, and obstruction of an active federal audit. By Thursday evening, Lieutenant Carl Foster had retained counsel and provided complete cooperation in exchange for testimony consideration. He surrendered the full digital trail without negotiation. Every access log, every altered accountability record, every falsified receiving document going back 47 months. The digital trail implicated 9 individuals across 3 Marine Corps installations, 6 in equipment accountability roles, 2 in supply chain management, and 1 battalion-level officer who had co-signed falsified receiving documents for 14 consecutive fiscal quarters in exchange for recurring payments that averaged $4,200 per quarter. CID and federal investigators worked 22-hour operational days for 3 consecutive days. By Friday morning, they had the complete architecture of a network that had been running for 4 years, 6 months, and 11 days. The warrant for Bork had been executed simultaneously with the warrants for 3 of the 9 implicated individuals, a coordinated action across 2 states and 2 Marine Corps installations, timed to prevent network communication once the first arrest became known. CID had coordinated with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, which had been building a parallel case on the civilian distribution side of the network for 8 months without a clear connection to the military supply end. Foster's cooperation disclosure provided that connection in 47 minutes of recorded testimony. The 2 cases merged within 6 hours of the hearing. Kenny Bork was taken into federal custody at a truck stop outside Charlotte at noon on Friday. His storage facility, reached by CID agents that afternoon, contained 2,441 individually cataloged items of diverted military equipment, body armor components, night vision devices, weapon accessories, optic mounts, suppressors. Tagged and documented over the following 18 hours. $3,200,000 in total value. Recovered. One name did not produce an arrest. A defense contractor intermediary in Virginia, the network's processing layer between the storage facility and legitimate civilian markets, had not appeared on the initial warrant. His firm's name was in Foster's cooperation disclosure. His registered address was not in the federal system by the time agents arrived. He had gone. Corporal Reyes was outside the debrief room on the second morning. He had been there since 0800. He came to attention when she came out, and he was holding a folded sheet of notepaper in his right hand, a handwritten statement he had prepared and carried in his BDU pocket since the day in the equipment corridor when she had read the tactical gap in the training field without being asked, and he had walked away with a question he couldn't answer. Reyes said, "I should have said something before this. Weeks before this. I knew something was wrong. I knew from the beginning something was wrong. Tara said, 'Stand up, Corporal.'" He was already standing. He straightened further. She looked at him for 3 seconds. 22 years old. Hands steady. Eyes direct. He had been coerced into participation in something he recognized as wrong and had written a handwritten statement and was standing here at 0800 because it was the right thing to do and it was going to cost him something, and he was doing it anyway. Tara said, "You said something. That matters." He nodded. He held the position for 3 more seconds. Then he walked away. Lieutenant Colonel Doyle submitted a formal statement to CID the morning after the hearing, detailing every administrative action taken against Tara during the 11-week period and the sequence of events that had led to the investigation being opened in the first place. It was, her legal clerk noted, the most thorough self-documenting statement the clerk had seen in 14 years of military legal work. Doyle had understood from the moment the JSOC flag appeared on the classification terminal that she had been used as an instrument in a fraud she had no knowledge of. The statement was her way of making that record complete and unambiguous. She submitted it without being asked to do so. It was logged and placed alongside the 312 pages and the 47 months of accountability records that Foster had surrendered, in a file that CID estimated would take 7 months to prosecute completely. 2 days before her transfer order activated, Tara walked to the equipment cage at 0600. The training bay was empty at this hour. The fluorescent strip lights hummed above the I-beams. The rubber mats were flat and clean and smelled of the industrial cleaner the night crew used, which had none of the lived-in quality the space took on during training hours. Everything was exactly where it had been at 0830 on a Tuesday morning, 11 weeks ago when she had stood on this mat and said one thing. Except the space was different, the way spaces become different after events occur in them that cannot be reversed, even when every object in them returns to its original position. Hawes was at the equipment cage. He was always at the equipment cage at this hour, had been, every operational day, for 32 years. He had a clipboard under his arm. He did not look up when she arrived. He looked at the clipboard for a moment, not reading it, holding it the way a man holds a familiar object when he needs a second to set himself in the right position for what comes next. And then he set it down on the supply rack. He looked at her for a long time, 32 years of service. He had watched things done well and done badly, and he had been present at more than one moment when a person inside a system that was working against them did the small thing that was within their reach, and it turned out to be enough. He was not a man who required acknowledgement of any kind. He had called Coles and filed the counter-statement and refused the group chat and stood at the rear of the briefing room, not because any of those actions would be recognized, but because they were the things available to him, and he had done them. He nodded once. She nodded back. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. Justice isn't loud. It's patient. And it turns, in the end, on the people who keep moving when the room has already decided that the outcome is settled. That Monday morning, the handler phone on her nightstand showed one new message. No sender designation, no header of any kind. The text read, Nighthawk 1. Tower 4 sends regards. Below the text, a photograph. A man in civilian clothes, mid-40s, gray at the temples, a briefcase, a well-tailored jacket, standing on a public sidewalk outside a glass and steel office building in Arlington, Virginia. The facade carried the logo of a defense contractor firm. Below the photograph, in the same message thread, Phase 2. Domestic infrastructure. He knows you're alive. She looked at the photograph for 17 seconds. She opened the green notebook. She wrote one line. She closed it. She set the handler phone on the footlocker and sat on the edge of the bed with her hands folded in her lap. She had one more cover identity in her file. She had been patient before. She could be patient again. She folded the handler phone into the footlocker and closed the lid. She stood up. She went to the window and looked out at the motor pool in the early morning, the sodium lights still on, the first shift workers just arriving at the vehicle bays, the sky at the eastern edge of the installation beginning to differentiate itself from the darkness at a color that had no name between gray and blue. 11 weeks, $3,200,000. 9 individuals in federal proceedings. One name in Arlington on a photograph in a JSOC secure inbox. A man who knew she was alive. She breathed. 4 counts in, 4, hold, 4, out, 4, hold. And then she went to make coffee from the packet on the footlocker, because the next mission would begin the same way the last one had, with a cover identity, a green notebook, and the patience to let the truth do the work she could not do for it. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe for more.